20th century is the age of electric technology. It's the most dominant tool of our time. And reevaluate.
Oh, this is narrative. But this show,
We're gonna do it totally different.
Welcome to the 5th episode of a 6-part media investigation. Today, we will be talking about documentaries. We will try to answer the question, what does a documentary actually show? Here we have, again, Zep, welcome, and Jason, welcome. We're gonna have an experiment, but we're gonna ask, why have we done what we have done? Zep, could you make a start?
yeah. Well, I think what we see reflected in all the previous episodes is that there's a fundamental disagreement between Jason and I about whether there is truth that you find or truth that you create. I think that's what you can guess from the last episode. And I think that documentaries are one of the best ways to show it, because as opposed to, for example, film, a documentary professes to find truth, right? A documentary is documenting life. A mockumentary is mocking a documentary of life, right? So in the name documentary, there's already an essence of we are accessing some kind of truth. So I think that if I want to prove my point that there is maybe not this finding of truth, but this creating of truth, then if we can apply that to the documentary, to one of the most purest forms of finding truth, supposedly, I think that is the biggest point that we can investigate to show this distinction.
Okay, so is there anything you would like to add before we're gonna, because we have made you guys have made both a documentary just of 1 minute to show how it works. Do you have anything to add before we're gonna look into what we have made?
No, just I hope to find out the truth about this.
So just to be clear, what you are saying is there's a truth on the matter. The documentary can show truth.
Yeah.
Okay, let's watch it then. Let's watch. Do you have a preference? I thought we will show Jason's ones first.
Yeah, so maybe we should explain it.
Go ahead.
There was a really funny essay in the NRC, in a Dutch newspaper. When we were deciding on this episode, we always like to have like a assignment that especially Jason and I fulfill to show some core. I think that's why, for example, the Vox Pop, in doing a Vox Pop, we gain so much more information than if we just talked about them, right? So in that way, we were like, okay, we want to make a documentary. It needs to be a little bit funny, and let's try to approach it from two different sides. So we have one news article, and we're going to approach it from two different sides to show that you can approach a documentary different, and that it's maybe a finding of truth if one of the documentaries doesn't work, or it's a creation of truth if both documentaries work, or if both don't work, right? So this article was about ants, like the little insects, that are swarming over the south or the north of The Hague in the dunes, where there's a lot of big businesses. So you have TNO, which is being swarmed by the ants. But the whole article was a bit funny about the war that NATO, who has just built a new communications headquarters there, will have with the ant.
So I think there's one, I want to summarize this part really quick. So what is important here is that you both agree that there are different narratives, as I'm coming back to a previous episode. There are different narratives, but what you're saying is there is actually narratives that are better than others. There's one truth that you can find. There's a narrative that you can find to be the most true, and you're kind of disagreeing with that, as we will come back to later.
Yeah, it's only as true as it is in your own bubble.
Okay.
Dirty relativist.
Okay. Now
It's not relativism.
Okay, so this is the first one. This is made by Jason. Let's watch it now.
Say hello to Lycius neglectus, an ant species considered invasive in many countries. Most recently, a colony of Lycius neglectus has been found around a NATO communications building near The Hague, threatening its infrastructure. Even if you are not a NATO skeptic, chances are you can find more things than you might expect to relate to with this unlikely neighbor. Doing some heavy lifting, sharing some food. Monday mornings, not having a permit to stay in our habitat, our world. not having signed the documents, and having forgotten to ask for the permission to exist.
None of us are free. None of us are free. One of us are chained. None of us are free.
Okay, so is there anything we should say about this before we are gonna watch the documentary from Zep? Let's just watch it then.
NATO, the organization built to protect us against threats, foreign, masked, and declared, has an ongoing war, one deep in the shadows. Not against an army with flags, but one with pheromones. No guns in sight, only mandibles. In The Hague, a NATO command center lies under siege. Its enemy, it's small, ancient and tireless. They attack, not with bombs or cyber warfare, but they sneak through our sockets. They eat our scraps. They leech off our wires. They pester, they swarm, they stay. This is not invasion by force. It is occupation by presence. Their networks are ancient. Their hierarchy is absolute. Their loyalty, it's unwavering. When even those tasked with our protection have fallen to the enemy. The time has come to fight, to exterminate them. And let us be clear, they do not belong with us. We have our world, they have theirs, and the line has already been crossed. Now they must go. Back to their tunnels, back to their dirt, back to their own goddamn country. Let us live in peace.
Okay, yeah. So here we have two documentaries. Which one is true, or is the truth not yet in there?
I wouldn't say that one of them is the truth. I think something I can start with is saying that Zep's documentary is obviously a conservative, a fascist documentary, and mine is progressive and conducive to truth.
So yours is better than Zep's.
Yeah.
Why?
I think, but I don't think that I achieved this really well in this documentary. But I think what a documentary should do, if it wants to be conducive to truth, is to try to confront the viewer with something. Yeah. Because I think a truth has to be outside of you. No, well, of course, because I think we find truth, but for there to be for the documentary to really do anything, it needs to confront you. It needs to force, and with confrontation, I really mean present you with something where your ways of interpreting the world, your symbolic systems, can't keep on going. You have to update yourself.
Yeah, because I want to also add to this point, because these are quite like low fidelity documentaries, just to show, right? So do you have maybe an example or a topic where you think in the real world you can really see the difference in what we are trying to show? So some documentaries open your eyes, and that's good, right?
Yeah. I don't know if I can think of another example. The way
Maybe
I did
like
it
the
in my
clothing
document-
industry. Like if there's a documentary about all the negative consequences of our fast fashion, would this contribute for you to
Well,
a good
I
narrative?
don't think these things are that radical, because those are documentaries where you watch it and you kind of already know. But you watch it so you can just say that you're engaged.
And what
with the
about,
issue.
because I just want to drive it home for you that we have clearly the opposition, like what you're concretely saying. Let's say we have a documentary about the prostitution in the red light district, and it shows how actually this is just a completely shady business. It's like there's like just a lot of forced prostitution. And imagine that, let's say it would be 20 years ago, like nobody ever knows this. Would this be a good example?
I think it might be a good example. I think it really also depends on how you do it. The way I did it in the Ants documentary, the way I tried to make it confrontational, is by kind of, getting
Leveling.
these yeah, by trying to build bridges
Mhm.
between the ants and the humans, saying, okay, you can, bless you,
Thank you.
we can relate to each other in some way, maybe even in the way that none of us are free, and that is an attempt at being confrontational. I don't think I had the time to truly be as confrontational, but that's the idea.
So then I want to show another documentary, and I'm curious, or it's a sub part of a documentary, and then I'm curious what you're thinking about this, all right? And then let's just let the discussion start.
Yeah, because this is the same music, as you may maybe hear, as the music that I used in my video. And this is from a 1980s documentary called Koyaanisqatsi, and it was revolutionary in its time, basically by having no narration, no like clear narrative to the music, to the video in its essence, but the whole documentary is 2 hours of showing people, and basically Koyaanisqatsi is in an American Indian language for a Native American language. It means in peril, like in problems. So this movie with the beautiful music by Philip Glass, basically is trying to show, well, if we just show images of people and we put this really heavy music behind it, we can already elucidate the wrongness, like you have create an effect, right? You evoke the effect in us, like even cognition that just it feels wrong if you see it like sped up or in slow motion. They really play with time in the beginning with like a rocket that launches in slow motion, or cars that drive in a beautiful time lapse. And here we see like the fruit ipu, or however the song is called, about buildings that just have been destroyed, that I think really captures that it is really in a narrative, it's really in a certain way of viewing, and in that way of viewing, like your effect prepares you to love this, to say yes, the planet is in peril. And that's why I use this in my against nature documentary, because this is for nature, this is against humanity, against like the technology, it's an anti-technological essay basically. Whereas the Ant documentary, of course, is like an anti-nature documentary. So I was trying to elucidate, like, is the music purely anti-nature, or is it a measure of effect that you can apply to multiple things?
Because this does apply. Some people actually make this claim. It's not something you have mentioned, but behind the recording, behind the scenes, yeah, we have talked about something like reification, right? Where people actually they do claim that the music already forces us to interpret something in a certain way, which I think is important, because otherwise your point, like people might not understand where are you pointing to. But here we again have a clear distinction.
Yeah. So would you okay? So reification is this push that a certain trope or a certain way of putting something already pushes you in a certain direction. And what a critical theorist would say, if you read, for example, Adorno's positioning on reification, you could say that, for example, you have a David Attenborough documentary, which I also tried to put in my video by having his voice in AI. You have an David Attenborough, very open-ended documentary on the BBC, very little music, a really slow narrating voice, which is juxtaposed to, for example, a National Geographic documentary where they have all these crazy sounds that kind of already inform you what to think of a certain animal. Like you make the animal cute or stupid or really ominous with it. Would you agree with that?
That this reification,
That David Attenborough is better than National Geographic?
okay, I think in some sense, yes. But I don't know, with an asterisk behind it. Because I think we have to watch out. This reification, we have to watch out for it. I think it's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what might be even more dangerous is the thought that you can go beyond it. Because I think when it comes to finding truth through a medium,
Mm-hmm.
the medium is in some sense itself a tool for the finding of this truth. I use the documentary, and then you find out that, okay, you go towards the truth, you find out the truth about ants. In doing this, I think you can make great use of the tools of the medium. So the documentary, one of its tools is, for example, this music that you use. And you use it in a fascist way, of course. But I think there's tons of situations where you can use these tools and actually be conducive to truth. Or, for example, the tool of deplatforming, censorship. This is something we discussed during Vox Pop.
Mm-hmm.
This is also, in some sense, a tool, but maybe in a different way that music is. But you use it to sometimes get towards truth. Because my claim there was that if you show the Nazi on Louis Theroux's thing, you might be walking away from truth because you have a responsibility to evoke something and paint this picture that moves the watcher, the viewer, towards truth. Okay, all this is useful, these tools of reification, but also really dangerous, because my claim around truth is its progression. If you're stuck as a producer in using these tools, then you are in some sense also never progressing, because you're stuck in, first of all, one medium, and that's already the first problem. You're doing it through one medium, so there's no real space for progression in that. But then also, if you're using the trope tools of your medium, then you get stuck. And I think that's what we have to watch out for in reification. And I think you do have to consciously try to break it. But then there's also the asterisk of, okay, just because you break the tropes, you're still using the same medium.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get stuck there.
So you're saying that reification is wrong only because it's in one medium?
Not necessarily. I'm saying it's wrong because it's static. But with it's a form of being static within your medium. But then even if you even if I say, okay, we have to watch out for reification, we have to be against it, then also the medium itself is still a way in which you're static.
But what is so bad about being static? Because for me, it really feels like such a destructive way to be static, to be anti-static, right? Because you're just fighting everything. Nothing. You can attach value to nothing that is, because the only way that something is able to get value is in being new, in being something that is changed. Of course, there is things that are better than they were, but not everything has to be a fight in that way. I just don't understand that.
Okay, here we'll probably get to a point where I don't have an answer anymore, but I will answer. I think we can know that we're not there.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, but then also
Never.
can't fully get there. But I think we can know that we're not there, and I think then there's a duty to progress in every way. And I think it also, to do this by posing what you're doing as truth, you make space for the counterpoint, for the destruction of what you yourself pose. Because if I come here and I say, okay, well, this is just a documentary about ants, but it's just my view of it. And that's because that's not exactly what you say, because you say we create truth. But if I really say, oh, this is just my perspective, then what do you do after that? I think you can't progress. And then again, well, the central question is, why is progression that important? I think we can know that we're not there. I think you have to make claims to truth to give also the other space to help get us there.
But that's exactly, I think, then we can tie in. You're saying we need to progress because we know we're not there. We're away from the good, the right? You can see this tendency clearly in critical theory, where the tendency is we are now in a state that's worse than what was or worse than that will be. That's like questioned, right? For Adorno, it's worse than it was. For other people, it's worse than it will be. So we have this rational core, we have this rational end, and we can see that, we can feel that, we have an effect towards it. We just talked about affect, right, with an A. We have that effect towards the good, the rational, and we can sense that certain characteristics, reification, are away from that, and that we should strive beyond it. Another way to look at it, which is very similar and which critical theory derives from, is of course German idealism, where someone like Hegel will be posing that self-development, like the Self-Entwicklung, that is a push which you can never reach, like the full, the absolute, right? You can never reach the best, the good, as you said, but it is a rational development. It is a historical push towards better. And I think, you of course studied the Dutch track, but I think that is one of the things that, for example, a intercultural approach to philosophy can show you immediately, that there's not this one telos, there's not this teleological development, but that is just a forever going on of different narratives, of different technological aspects, of different mediated ways of thinking towards a certain prospect or in a certain tract, so that there's not this one end goal, but this push that you, in a mediated sense, are pushed towards, right? Earlier you said, Zep, you're a relativist. Hurts me absurdly. What it actually says, that I'm a relativist, actually says like, I am adhering to this implicit metaphysical claim that there is this telos, that there is this one singular end point, and that everything that is against that, everything that questions my truth, anything that questions that this, and that poses like this or whatever, is just wrong.
To some extent, I might be guilty of posing this central truth, because I do say that there's something we move toward.
Yeah.
You know, we can't reach it, but okay. I do still think that there's clearly still this productive process going on. Even by me, like within us too, I make this claim now of what I think goes on in truth. And then now you can, really destroy it.
Yeah.
I think this is a process conductive to truth as well. And I think if I put it more into a local scale, and I think for me these things, I believe they stem mostly from the political. I think where I feel this the most, and this for me stems a lot from the political, is in cases of political progression.
Yeah.
I think this is the clearest case where we can say, okay, we're not there yet. And I don't think that has to be a totalizing, a universalizing process. To make that claim that we're all moving to something central is already much, much more than I'm allowed to do by just saying, okay, I know we're not there yet. And there, I think, look, I'll take an example of one of my favorite movies, Spike Lee, Do the Right Thing. I think this is a truth process just in the same way a documentary is. And much better, more conducive to truth than, for example, my aunt's documentary. Because I think it's confrontational.
Yeah.
If you are someone who is just your average centrist, because that's the thing, it's easy to have kind of anti-racist films like Spike Lee's Black Gay Klansman that, attack the the KKK members, the clear racists. You can watch that and be like, well, I'm not that, so I'm fine. Spike Lee, you watch that, and then if you're your average Joe, you think, oh, this pizza guy's pretty nice. In the end, you see that he is. It's a lot more than just showing he is the problem. But in the end, you see that he is a racist, and you can't be him.
Yeah.
You can't identify with him.
Yeah.
But if you don't watch out, you will identify with him. I think this is a case where I would just claim that there is truth. In the moment that the structure breaks, in the moment that you feel you are confronted here, and this is a truth that's outside of you, and that happens in local situations, and it is a movement towards, because it's these structures inside of you breaking, I don't agree that that has to be a totalizing claim.
But that also, I think, broadening again, because you said the documentary, but does this then apply to multiple media, maybe like better advertisements that have more diversity in race, gender, etc., economic class maybe? And so then it seems that your truth can also be in a film, can also be maybe in a song. So anything that is just, so then the truth for you is just showing more light maybe on these issues that need to be attacked. Is that about right? Or?
Yeah, because absolutely. I think my claim now would be that the difference between the media is mostly, when it comes to truth, the truth process is mostly a difference in the tools of the medium. But the truth that I see in a film or a documentary or anything like that is derived not from the content itself, but from the form of it being confrontational. I think you can do that in multiple media. I think a big thing is expectations.
Now I hear Zep screaming from I don't know, the Fox Pop, because you're in the narrative.
Yeah, like you're so deep in your narrative, so deep. And the Spike Lee movie works. Why does it work? Because he can create this character. He can create the pizza shop owner. He can put little scenes in the movie where he's okay, so that the ending, the climax, is more detrimental, right? Because he's a multifaceted character, like Spike Lee is able to draw him out. And that's beautiful. Because it is a problem that there's racists, right? But what I'm saying is way less about that. And that's also why we are not discussing movies, but we're discussing documentaries. Because documentaries profess truth-finding. And movies are more about that confrontation, I think. There's more movies that want to push that confrontation. There's more documentaries that want to find truth. I think that immediately points us to, well, we can watch two things. Maybe do the business one. Introducing Business Explains the World. I was scrolling on YouTube and I saw some videos about the NBA and why the NBA is more boring than European basketball. And then it went into this, how universities adopted college athletics teams in the USA, and they didn't in Europe. And in Europe, that's why they're very like grassroots still, and in the USA, they're way less fun. And then watch the video, it's quite okay. But then I was like, what the fuck is this name? Business Explains the World.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We're saying I'm Nick and I've been a business editor and journalist for 20 years. Yeah, okay, great. I'm Nick and I've been a business journalist, reporter, and editor for 20 years now. And I want to announce something big. There are many great shows that explain the world through the lens of tech, science, politics, or power. But we're taking a different approach. This show, Business Explains the World, is built on the belief that business explains everything.
I love how just in your face he is. You have all these shows and they're really good and they explain it from this angle or this angle or this, or narrative. But this show, we're gonna do it totally different. We're gonna say business explains everything. I think this guy is fucking stupid. He has this idea that somehow business is never explained. I think a lot of people on YouTube are fully explaining stuff from the business angle. Like, just watch any right-wing fucking program. Anyway, I think it's so beautiful, and I don't think he sees that he is so caught up in his narrative, that he's so stuck in his narrative. I don't think he sees, like you don't see, that you are just so like tunnel visioned. Like, he feels the pain. This is wrong. All these people are saying technology focused, but technology only develops because of business investment. It doesn't. He's saying you have these. What other examples did he give? He gives all these examples, but he feels like he has been trained so much. He is so caught up in the system of explaining stuff from the business that he's like, these are all failing because business explains the world. There's another episode about truck sizes between Europe and America. There's this tendency to like, oh, Europe better, America worse, which I do agree with. So but that's beside the point. And he's like, European trucks are getting bigger. They are way safer than America. In America, you don't have to have an a airbag in your truck, in your semi-trailer. Didn't know that. Crazy fact. Anyway, he's then saying business explains the world. Like, it's business that makes American buses or American trucks different than European, and we can learn from them. And then I did think like, well, isn't it fucking regulation that makes it that American trucks can have a certain weight and have a certain size? Sorry.
Okay, but I want to directly comment on this. What if someone listens to this or watches this and says, but wait, actually, what you just said is your narrative. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think that the best theories are the theories that also acknowledge their own position within that theory, right? I think that where German idealism fails is that it has to make this metaphysical supposition, right? It has to claim the absolute. Where critical theory fails is that it has to assume this rational, and that you can reach the rational through somehow progressing and destroying the wrongs. So of course I'm stuck in a narrative, of course. But we all are, and you can't, like, you can only describe the world from your world. Like, this is our world, and this is the only way that we can be in it.
And then the second objection would be, I'm curious if you have a reaction to this, is if you don't say there's a truth, are you saying then we can just say everything? We can say anything and everything is equally true?
Well, that's the other point about the relativism claim that Jason had, right? Jason said, you're a relativist, but the relativist says there is no truth. Like, we can be relatively different towards that, right? I think, of course, there is a truth. Like, when we touch a table or when we hit the table, it makes a sound in our microphones. And when we kick a ball, it will fall. And when Gijsbers drops his pen, then the pen will land on the ground. Sorry, Gijsbers is more about mugs, right? And Johan de Jong is more about pens. Anyway. Of course, there is a truth. But what, for example, the scientific method shows is that we cannot know the truth. We can only know that a scientific method works until it's disproven, for example, right? So we don't know whether ESMC squared is actually true. We just know that when we put some really difficult calculations out there, then it does seem to approach that way of viewing the world. And in that way, I think that narratives are formed. Some are closer adhering to how the world actually works. Some are less. Then you have talks about mystics, for example. But your narrative just explains how the world works for you. And, for example, how our brains work, it doesn't really matter whether they adhere to what actually happens. Because, you know, we just live in our world rather than in the world. So that's, for example, when Ricoeur went to his psychoanalytic turn, he said, like, well, Freud had this whole theory about the psyche, but it had to adhere to what actually happened. And then Ricoeur says, well, no, that's not true. Like, the really good psychoanalyst will know how it feels for someone, and that is the main thing in being able to change his views towards something, because it doesn't matter whether you actually were hit as a baby. It matters whether you feel that you were hit as a baby, right? It's our affect towards that thing.
Okay, so one thing you said a bit of a while ago already is about this difference between a documentary and film, and that there is, of course, this documentary makes the claim to truth, and that's where it sets itself apart. And I think here's a point where we will probably not disagree a lot, because I think, this claim to truth, here's the point where we do disagree then. I think this is what makes it harder to find truth through documentaries, because this is already a problem. If you watch it and you expect to find the truth, you're much more likely to, I'll use your words, to just bring it into your own narrative. I think watching a movie puts you more at risk to having your narrative broken. But documentaries can do it as well, and that's what I think makes a good documentary, is one which confronts your narrative. And that brings me into my second point, because...
But now you're talking with my wording.
Yeah.
So you do agree with it.
Well, I want to use it because I think you can say, okay, well, everything is narrative. But then clearly there are moments where your narrative, and the way I said it in the beginning is maybe your symbolic structure, maybe your ways of interpreting the world, your narrative is confronted and does break. I think this is maybe psychoanalytically, this is where we just call it trauma, right? Your narrative, this is why, I'm not going to go into psychoanalytic, but I think, maybe I will, that if you're not prepared for it, this is the moment, these are the things that are most traumatic, the things that you didn't know that would happen, right? If I go into a protest and I'm ready for the police violence, it will suck, but it might not be traumatic because my role as someone who gets beat is already expected.
And you're prepared for it.
Yeah, but if you go into it thinking, okay, I'm just, gonna protest a bit and then leave, it will be traumatic because it's not in your narrative yet what will happen. And then it breaks. This is where I want to talk about truth, because I think this is, again, it comes to the political, we have to move somewhere. I think we have to break our narratives. I think this is also something I can argue for within myself. I think all the value I find is the moments where my narrative about the world has been broken and I find something outside of me.
Yeah.
And I think you can feel that happening, and I think you have to have something to say about that if you're gonna say, okay, everything is narrative. And then I wrote down a third thing, but I don't know. Okay, positioning yourself in your theory. This is where I think I can also escape this having to, although in my wording I haven't escaped it, because I keep talking about this truth that we move towards but never find. I think I can escape that a bit, in the sense that, to me, what's primary is just these moments of tekortschieten, of failing, of falling short, where it breaks, and then.
But for you, this is good, right? Because it's the movement again that you become better. It's
the movement, and there's, of course, there's probably the metaphysical claim in saying that, we're not there, because where is there? But what is really primary to me is the moments where narrative breaks. And I think there is truth in that.
So you're saying basically, well, Zep, you're accusing me of being a narrative, but my narrative is way more encompassing other narratives as well, which I am glad to take on if they are good, if they break with bad things, or...
Yeah, or my narrative is to be against my own narrative, something like that. And then that probably fails somewhere, but then I'll say, okay, well, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
But then what is my narrative? What do you...
Well, your narrative is progress.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I think that that's the bad part. Because everything is seen as a fight, right? You say, in assessing something where I find truth, where I create truth for myself, is when things rupture. So you have the time when you still believe in Sinterklaas, and then you have the rupture, where your parents tell you Sinterklaas does not exist, or even worse, that your classmates are like, didn't you know that yet, you fucking imbecile? That's the rupture. For you, that's the moment of truth, right? It's a moment of pain, it's a moment of inflection, it's a moment where you cannot be prepared for. So your narrative is a narrative of progress, because you were a worse person before than you are after. And I think that that's not necessarily true. I think a kid is just as valuable before it knows that Sinterklaas doesn't exist as after, maybe even more, because it lives in a more pure form. And for you, that purity is the more you develop towards your progress, right? You are becoming more and more pure of a person because you see the world better, you acknowledge the world better, and the world becomes better. But I think there's, it's a bit like the Hobbes versus Rousseau distinction about is the increasing society something that makes us better, or that's something that makes us worse? Is growing up, is the childlike the better part, or is the adult-like the better part? And I think that if we say that there's some childlike purity or some playfulness in a kid, I think that really evokes the kid who still believes in Sinterklaas, or who can create his own value in his limited worldview. I think that there's a really big part in your narrative of change, of progress, of change, truth finding in that change that you lose.
Okay, I don't know how I will do it, but I want to.
But I will.
But I want to absolutely steer clear of claims of like, now I'm better than I was. But of course, well,
it's necessary, no?
No,
I don't
because
know
he
if it's
says
necessary.
it's just the movement. So the only thing tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that what you're saying is really the thing that you should like look at and value is just the movement. There's not like the end station where you actually get to. There's not like a comparison. It's just you believe, if you look into the world, there are injustices, there are wrongdoings, there are all kind of bad stuff, and just the movement to fight that, it's good in itself.
But also finding it, but also acknowledging it. And that's a teleological move that you didn't see. I don't know, people go to Thailand and they go to like an elephant walk and they sit on an elephant. And then they find out that those elephants are hurt. And then the next time they go to Thailand, which, that's beside the point. But and then a week later they're in Chiang Mai and they see the elephant rescue, and then they find out, oh, these elephants that we sat on just now, they are punished, right? And for you, that's a telos. Like, I'm better than I was before because I know the world. No?
No, I see. Okay, I like this host because I think I can. I feel represented. And I think this is a moment where maybe I can try to shed the baggage of a telos, because exactly the moment of confrontation as a form of movement, as a form of progression, is where, to me, all the truth stems from and all the value stems from. I don't think we have to use that to say, okay, now we're better than we were. But I do think, because I think it's always about actions, about process. And once you start identifying with something, once you start saying, I'm better than I was, then you're already, I think that's already shying away from progress. I think that's an easy way to say, oh, well, now I've read 5 self-help books, now I'm good enough, but of course you can say that you keep engaging with it. But to be truly progressing is you have to identify solely with the movement.
Are you then also saying that potential, because I'm curious, it's maybe not your vocabulary, but are you saying that potential is worth more than actuality?
I think, no, I think that vocabulary is already too dangerous, because I could think potential is loaded. Well, I think pulling the two apart doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and potentiality is loaded with the idea of, oh, I'll be it someday. But
Okay,
you
can I
have to
ask you
do
something?
it.
How do you make sense of Trump in this way?
How do I make sense of Trump?
It's change.
Yes, I think I fall a real risk of being an accelerationist in this.
Because okay, what I immediately feel is a accelerationist is against a lot of the concept of institutions, right? You have the Paris Climate Accord, you have the judicial system, you have the opposition of power, all kinds of institutions that are static, that don't embody the change, the progression, the rupture that is needed, right? And I think that in being this change-minded person, in going against seeing the world as more of a, well, you have the truth, but we can never really approach it. I think you just become a Trump, and then maybe you will say, okay, but Trump is like adhering to my values for the negative, and I'm for the positive. But I think that this just shows again that you both have a telos, and they're different, and that is just narrative.
Okay, so it's your analysis. Is there also like a real danger in this, or is it just?
Well, I think that
Your-
Trump
your-
shows what the danger is in some regards. I think that Milei in Argentina shows what the danger is in another part. I think that Foucault in his political turn shows what the danger is in yet another part. I think that, well, maybe becoming too extremist in your beliefs in any regard shows what the danger is of not acknowledging that you are in a narrative, or not truly engaging with that narrative.
So are you saying then it's okay if you're in whatever narrative, as long as you just acknowledge you are in that narrative?
I think that deep acknowledgement of your narrative, deep acknowledgement of the, well, if we go to Nietzsche in terms like the genealogy of how something came to be, I think that that's the only way to accept, like, okay, well, there are these other people and they do have other beliefs, and maybe I am not like the most genius person when it comes to this certain assertion. Maybe there is some value to the other person.
Okay, I'll give my analysis of Trump, but first, I think this comes a bit close to being kind of perverted.
Of course.
If you say I can have my narrative as long as I accept it, it's the same as saying like, it would be a really mean thing to say to you, Arthur, but you know, I think you're a terrible person. But I said that it's a mean thing to say, like something like that. But then, of course, you know.
Now I'm hurt.
Yeah. No, but I said it was going to be a mean thing. I think that runs the risk of just being perverted as just, okay, yeah, it's my narrative. Okay. And then we go. So, okay, that's a gripe I have. My analysis of Trump is exactly shows the risk of not accepting progression enough. Because the real issue...
He's changing so
No.
much. He reinterprets the whole country. He destroys the judicial system. He leaves every accord. He says, well, the whole concept of NATO, fuck that shit. You know, we have had 200 years from Adam Smith onwards where we say, like, bigger business, more between countries trade is better. And then, you know, of course, America was also protectionist in the Woodrow Wilson times, but now he's going back to that times. Like, he is destroying the whole telos, the whole wrong telos that he identifies. He's he sees like his truth. You know, there is a way of breaking down the system, draining the swamp. It's exactly what you're saying, but then in a different, like, you just have a different point that you look towards. What is the drained swamp?
But that's, I think he is the symptom of what happens when you see progression as moving towards this point. Because that's the 200 years of capitalism. It's just, okay, well, we progress by more, but that's only quantitative progression. It's never substantial progression. And if you do that long enough,
But
something is going to happen that you'll just traumatize yourself. This is political. I don't know, traumatize is not a good word, but something radical will happen, but not in the way you wanted it. A Trump will come and then, change, but this is not really the change, but because of course it's just concentrating power into the, the techno-feudalists and stuff like that. So it's not real change, but it's the symptom of what happens when you lock it. When you have Joe Biden's, when you have...
Okay, I have to break in here because we almost have to end this episode. And I don't think you're going to agree in the next 2 minutes. So for anyone who's... Can you summarize your position? What does a documentary show in 1 minute? Or any message you want in maybe one sentence. Keep it one sentence.
Okay, I think we have to use media to confront ourselves, to break our narratives. I think documentary, we can use it, but we have to be extremely careful with it because it has all this baggage of all the claims to truth. And it's so easy to watch a documentary and be like, oh, well, now I've got it. I've just quantitatively know more about this. But if you go into it like that, you rarely ever watch a documentary and realize, oh my God, I have to update my system.
Now shorter, 2, 3 words. Or do you leave it at this?
Media should confront.
Media should confront.
Or be radical.
3 words. Media should confront. Okay, and Zep.
Well, I think that what we see in documentaries is that you create truth, you don't show truth. And you see that just as well in Spike Lee, because it confronts, because it creates a narrative, because it affirms to a certain narrative. And in affirming to that narrative, it disagrees with the other. And
truth is narrative in your story here, right? Or no? Like you create the truth is you create a narrative in which there is a truth. Or that was the last thing I was not sure.
Narrative is... Truth is found in narrative. I think that my position is that in narratives we can see most clearly, especially in what we have created, in what we have seen, that even though something says it's a documentary, it documents, it is creating of values, it's creating of a way of looking at it. And David Attenborough is not better than National Geographic, it's just adhering to a different stance.
There's not one truth. There are multiple truths. There are multiple ways of representing or finding or creating.
Well, you create your truth. And whether that is the truth that we can't know, we are always mediated. That's it.
Okay, well, I have to end it here. Next time, we will reflect on the podcast as a medium itself. Thank you very much for being here. And I hope then to catch you in the last episode next time. Ciao.
The method slots.